Okay. Yeah, Councillor Williams?
It's just that I'll abstain from the minutes. I thought you'd appreciate me not sharing my COVID with you back when the last meeting was, so I wasn't in attendance, Chair.
It's good to see you're fully recovered. Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Chair, if I could just propose a slight amendment to on agenda item 6, the quarterly progress report, in the 7th paragraph, which currently says it was also suggested that the way in which the Cambridge South East Transport project was presented in the report was confusing, as it appeared to separate phase 1 and phase 2 into 2 separate projects. And it's proposed to amend that to, it was also suggested that the situation regarding funding and risk related to phase 2 of the Cambridge South East Transport project could be made clearer if the report differentiated between the separate aspects of phase 2, given that the part related to the Cambridge Biomedical Campus was funded and proceeding.
That's noted. Any other comments? So, if they can then be, you can just confirm that the minutes are acceptable, subject to that amendment. Thank you very much, and I'll sign those as a correct record of the meeting. Just turning then to agenda item 4, there are questions from members of the public. These are set out at the agenda pack, pages 17 to 18. There are 6 public questions. There'll be one on item 7, 8 and 9, Greenways proposals. There are 2 on item 7, Bottom Greenway, the bulk path. 2 on item 8, the Comberton Greenway, Sidgwick Avenue. And 1 on item 9, Greater Cambridge Greenways, Comberton for business case. So those questions have been published on the website, and they're in front of the members of the Assembly. And you'll be able to, people who can ask those questions, you'll be able to put them at the start of the relevant agenda item. So agenda item 5, petitions, and there are no petitions. So we'll just move then to item 6, the quarterly progress report, which is in our agenda pack 19 to 54. The Assembly's role here is to consider and comment on the updates that will be presented to the Executive Board. There are no specific recommendations. So I'm going to manage the discussion as follows. We'll go through the work streams item by item, and then, but first of all, we'll have Niamh Matthews, who's the Assistant Director, Strategy and Programmes, will respond to the questions that we have, and I'll invite Niamh to introduce the report first of all. So, Niamh, can you have your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So, as you say, I know you'll flick through the reports section by section. Just in advance of that, there might be just a couple of things to mention that are kind of different or slight updates from when you last met. So we talk about major planned utilities works in this paper across the city. So that's Cadent, UKPN, the kind of Cambridge Heat Network. We know there will be an impact on scheme delivery for obvious reasons, particularly on the kind of corridor schemes. So as you would expect, we're working with Streetworks and with utilities to understand what the impact will be and what the best way to plan around that. But just to flag that here in this space. And just the second thing to say, which is different, normally we give you the up-to-date info and figures from the Centre for Business Research, but just because of the way that the cycle has fallen, that will be next time. They are giving a presentation on the 23rd of February, so that you should all be on the list for that, and you'll get the full update at that point. Happy to take any questions as you run through the paper. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members of the Assembly might want to explore the scope and extent of those roadworks and their wider implications on our programme as we progress through here. So the first work stream, the transport delivery work stream. Has anybody got any questions to?
Thank you, Chair. I've been looking at Appendix 1, which has the transport delivery overview, and I just have some questions regarding the status ratings and the completion forecasts on some of them. I live in the area of St Ives Greenway, so it's come about because I've noticed the delivery on that. In the previous report from the last meeting, it was rated as green amber, or amber, sorry, and now it's related as amber green. So previously it was amber and now it's changed to green, but there's no information as to why it's changed to green. It's under the 5.1 table. And I've also noticed that it's still down for completion of the whole project in 2026, but the business case isn't coming to the board until November 26. Some other dates, for example, Comperton has stayed at 2026, but Swaffham's has now changed to 2027, Barton Greenway has changed to 2027. So I just wondered about the information on here and whether it's accurate and whether it needs updating a little bit more.
So what we've tended to do is to update these dates as we've brought a substantive paper forward. That was kind of as we'd agreed in previous meetings. But Thomas might just want to say a couple of bits on some of the progress just to cover that off completely.
Yeah, so on St Ives, I think in terms of the paper, we were actually now looking at July, and that might not have been updated in the forward plan, so apologies for that. We'll make sure that happens going forward. You know, we have made good progress recently on that project. We'll make sure the project manager gives you an update on that. In terms of kind of some of those other dates, quite a few of them have changed just in response to the paper, the programme paper that came last time, which Niamh just kind of alluded to, where that provided date updates on all of the different schemes. So you might see things have gone from just slightly changed in terms of their dates as a result of that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's just that a lot of the projects, although the date has changed, have moved to green. So it was understanding that. And also at the previous meeting, we did request that there be some information on the percentage for each project as to how far through each project we are, and there's no information on that in the report. So I wondered where we were with that as well. Thank you.
So on the first point, these are within the definition of how the RAG statuses are done. So as the project dates change, if they're on target for that date change, it gets to go from amber to green, which doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. So I think I agree with that, and I think we should look at that. And on your second point, why don't we just look at how we're presenting progress generally and see if we can just be a bit clearer on how things are going along.
On the individual projects, I think we'd said it'd be quite nice to see on the projects whereabouts they were. This is the whole project, we're currently here, kind of.
Yeah, we'll look at it, thanks.
Claire, please, thank you.
Just requesting if there's any more update on Chisholm Trail Phase 2. It's got a passing comment in here, but if there was any update, that would be useful.
We're prepared for that.
Well, prepared, we can give an update. So I think last time, pardon me, I sort of bemoaned to some degree working with the rail industry. Nevertheless, it's the rail industry's chess set that we're going through. We are working with them through the processes that we're required to go through. We're currently at the drainage assessment stage in terms of exactly where we are in working with them on that. It's Network Rail, it's GB Railways, and they drive the timetable, unfortunately, not us. That said, we have had some very detailed conversations with East West Rail, and I think it is fair to say that they have recognised the huge benefit that the next stage of the Chisholm Trail delivers for their ambitions and their aspirations. So I think we have a willing partner who have also now gone in and approached the rail industry around their enthusiasm and support for delivering Chisholm Trail. But I think, as I said last time, we need to focus on the deliverability or otherwise of the on-rail section, because that then drives other conversations that we will need to take place, particularly Cromwell Road, because you might do something different with Cromwell Road if you're not going on the rail side. And then if you're not going on the rail side, you then have the challenge of how you get through Romsey with the sort of car parking. So I think we need to focus on that rail confirmation before we then start embarking on consultation and engagement with people that will have a potentially profound impact on the roads around them. Well, so in terms of the East West Rail and their ambitions around the East Cambridge station, mobility hubs, I think, you know, recent conversations with them, they realised that these things actually are quite inexplicably linked, and it would be a jolly good wheeze if Chisholm Trail was delivered in advance of that. And so we are, you know, I think we can count on their support to take it forward. Clearly, we all, though, are seeking to motivate and to work with the rail industry back to it being their chest set.
So obviously this section is now gaining much more significance with the emerging proposal for the mobility hub. I think just recognising, and I've been discussing with Peter, I had this experience with Railway Property Board 30 years ago. They're extremely difficult. You know, the culture hasn't changed. It's very slow moving. So I think it might be helpful if the Assembly send a message through to the board that perhaps they might consider finding ways to lobby Network Rail to progress this for us, because it's so significant and it's in their interest, because it's going to drive rail passenger numbers up for them too. So that would be a message we could send to the board. Thank you very much. You're like poker players. Thank you. I can't read your cards, but I'm taking that as a positive. Thank you. Paul, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. I have a comment and a question. I'd just like to support what Annika was saying about better information on progress on the greenways. I know I've raised this one before, but again, the Waterbeach Greenway similarly has moved from amber to green, but it's not clear why. I went back and looked at the February 24 agenda pack, and it was forecast to be completed in 2025. It's now forecast to be complete in 2027. So that doesn't give me a great deal of confidence in the delivery, because it's moved 2 years in 2 years. So I think we need better information about what is blocking these schemes and what the problems are. The question I have is actually about CSET Phase 1. So that's been stuck for quite a long time, and it's always been a planning issue. I think my understanding is it is stuck at county council planning. It would be good if to have a better explanation as to what is going on there. And we have county councillors in the room. Maybe we can do something to help unblock it.
Thank you, Paul, for this. So I think your first comment has been picked up, and thank you both for pointing that out. Can we answer the CSET?
Yeah, on CSET's Phase 1, it's a technical planning issue where there's a trade-off between bats and lighting, which has been a significant issue. What we're proposing to do is to bring back a full paper on CSET's Phase 1 to the next cycle to update on where we are and how we take that scheme forward, because it's at an impasse at the moment. So we're looking to bring back a full paper with proposals to kind of finalise everything within that project.
Good, Paul.
Yeah, thank you for that, Thomas. I want to highlight the importance of this scheme. I think an important element of this scheme is it is addressing a road safety issue. So it is important that this does progress and it is unblocked, and that wherever it's blocked in the county council, they understand the importance of that scheme for addressing safety issues.
When can we expect a report back on this?
Yeah, it'll be the next cycle, Chair.
Okay, so Councillor Bear Park's points noted. Thank you. Are there any more on transport? Ian?
Thanks. I think you probably covered the point about Amber Green. I think, if I understand correctly, what you're saying, because the Amber thing is delivery projected after target date with measures in place to meet the target date. But that, I'm guessing it might be just a mistake then, because the Chisholm Trail is 26 and 26. So that, by that definition, should be green. But what I've kind of, the first question I wanted to ask on a basic level, are those, just in terms of trying to scrutinise this last night, are those years, does it mean the end of that year as a target date? Or is there a bit more detail behind this, like a month or something like that, that we're not getting?
So I'd love to be able to say exactly which month each of these projects would come forward, but I don't think we're able to do that. I think there are most accurate estimation as we have at this moment. We'll take the point away around the target completion dates versus when they change, how the reg ratings change and how that looks when it's presented.
Thanks. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I was saying month just to pick a unit of time. I mean, it could be a quarter or anything like that, or a percentage. But there's lots in the kind of reading through the notes about. We've talked about blockages at various points. Some from partners and some from partner authorities. I don't know what the other assembly members think, but I just wonder whether there's a case to do maybe pick one scheme, possibly the one that the officers are finding the most complex, and do just a bit of an offline workshop where we just run through a bit of detail about what problems you're having where, and we can all put our heads together, because it's not always going to be the county, it's not always going to be the city, it's not always going to be South Cambs, and just try and get into a bit of, without needing a report, just run through like a workshop of saying you had this problem, this problem, this problem, and we can try and work out how, if we can help, to try and unblock the various bits. Maybe people think.
One opportunity there might be to do that, Chair, if the Assembly wanted to, is the kind of transport working group that's in the diary, I think, for April time. One option.
I've got Tim, then Heather.
Thanks, Chair. I would support that suggestion from Councillor Manning about drilling into a particular case with complexity so that we can get a better hook on what actually holds things up. And I think it would be great if we could do that. Whether the Transport Working Party has sufficient time at a single meeting, I don't know, but if it's going to be taken on board, that would be welcome. I had a question about two transport work streams which haven't yet made it onto the grid with the colours on it on page 23. The first of those is at 6.10, the City Access Project. I'd just like to register my increasing concern that that this aspect of our work has been left right to the end, and that what starts to happen is that the financial implications of all the other projects which are in motion start to be producing implications for the things that haven't started. And so I'm really looking, like, I understand that there is a weight on for the Combined Authority Mayor's Cambridge Transport Strategy, Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy. I understand that we ideally need that, but I think the question I have really is, can we be reassured that there is a really strong ring fence around the funding that exists for that whilst we wait, so that it doesn't become an easy solution for other overspent projects. And the second one I wanted to raise was the one that follows it on the list at 6.11, which is about Hills Road. So the roundabout is not the part I'm asking about. It's the remaining corridor, which it stretches from the Hills Road Sixth Form College to the Catholic Church Crossroads, where one workshop took place, must be more than a year ago now, with stakeholders in quite a lively, but I think constructive mode, and then nothing. And so there were some challenges for sure that came up out of the workshop, but in terms of retaining the public engagement that I think we need and value, eliciting people's views, getting them all out onto the table, and then nothing is really a way of unhooking all of the value of the engagement we've just done. And I heard a reason that there were some roadworks, the roadworks I think we're all aware of on Hills Road, which were holding this up. But actually, it doesn't really make sense to me, because this was a process that we were doing here, which was deciding what our plan was. We weren't looking for road space to implement the plan, which I would agree the roadworks would have been in the way of. So I really want to know what we can expect when, during the forthcoming year, to see that this picked up and proceeded with.
So taking them in order, so city access. So, the ring fence, I suppose the first line of the ring fence is actually the joint assembly. If we want to change or we want to revise the budget, the proposal comes here. So if we want to revise the budget allocation for city access, you will be asked for your view on it. We will clearly, officers will put forward some form of justification, rationale, explanation, or whatever else, but it will come here. So there will be no sleight of hand in terms of moving that budget around, because these are public decisions, and you will rightly hold officers to account. I have absolute confidence that you will do that, having been here for some period of time and having the scars for some of those conversations. So I think you can rest assured that whilst there is work ongoing around that transport strategy, and we do need to knit into that for a number of sort of practical and policy-based reasons, that there will be no movement of that budget allocation without your view and ultimately the board taking a decision on it. In terms of Hills Road, I hear the challenge. I do think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword in terms of having conversations around what that, particularly the junctions, might look like at a time when there are ongoing roadworks. But that will be reinvigorated. It will be reinvigorated during the course of this year, and we look forward to taking forward the conversations that have happened already and continuing to engage as to what those proposals should look like for Hills Road, as we will do in terms of other main thoroughfares in Cambridge. But just in terms of what else is written in this quarterly progress report, we are going to still need to work through the cadent timetable, so we are clear on when we could reasonably get onto site. There is an argument to say discussing something in year one and then 3 years later going to site. We've just got to balance that. There needs to be some sort of clear process and timeline, because otherwise I think quite rightly communities could say, well, you may well have spoken to us about that 2 or 3 years ago, but the world has moved on. So we're trying to get that balance right, but you can expect updates later this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On this section, just two small things, one of which it's not in the report itself, but was referred to about the mobility hub. When we had the discussion about that before, we did suggest that some alternative description for that, because a mobility hub can be used in very different ways, and actually normally it's to do with accessibility for people with mobility issues. So to be really clear with what we're talking about. The other thing is on page 23, Fulbourn Greenway. There doesn't seem to be sort of an explanation. That's still in the amber, and obviously work was meant to start back in 2024, if I remember correctly. And that still seems, it's referenced at early design stage. So I'm just wondering, is there any prospect of that moving forward? Because it is, I understand it's frustrating for everybody that when something's actually supported, it'd be nice to get it over the line. And the things that are progressing seem to be the things in some cases that are the least supported. So it'd be nice to have something that we can actually achieve. That would be welcomed.
In terms of Fulbourn, so again, this is part of the formatting. I mean, that scheme's split into 3 phases, and phase 3, which is the Mill Road section, is in early design. Whereas if you look at phase 1, which is included the section from Fulbourn down to the Arrow Road level crossing, you know, we've helped facilitate the widening of the Tesco path already. That, you know, part of that's already been constructed. So, you know, it's again, the formatting of the report probably doesn't help in terms of when we're looking at the greenways and the number of different component parts within them. So we'll take that away to look at and see how we can change the formatting.
Thank you. Can we move on to the skills work stream, please? Page 30 of your agenda pack. Questions?
Yeah, just a quick question, really. Just in the items that are amber, I think it would be just useful to have just a little bit of commentary on why they're amber in the way that we do with the transport work delivery work stream as well. It's quite difficult, although there's a lot of text afterwards, it's quite difficult to kind of understand precisely what's going on.
Christian Ann?
A similar sort of question in terms of, I know it's actually not a longer contract and some of the numbers are quite low, particularly I think with engagement with employers, which is taking through. So just to understand a little bit more about what's driving that and if that's a problem, and if so, how can we support them to get them addressed?
So we take the point on formatting again, but on kind of progress, we expect it to pick up in the next set of reports as we reflect on more of the academic year. You have to hold me to that when I give you the next set of reports.
Thank you. I think the skills section is something that I think has progressed very well through the GCP. I appreciate some things from the amber, but with current sort of everything's moving quite quickly when it comes to Cambridge, isn't it? We've got Development Corporation coming, and government have definite desires of what Cambridge will look like. But that in itself, when you think also not far from here, you've got things like Universal happening at a similar time. The skills that we're looking at, is that going to, as much as, you know, to be, I think it's quite clear that I'm not supporting the Development Corporation, but the reality is it's probably going to happen. For these things to happen in a swift manner and not end up a lot of delays, there's going to be actually a lot of skills that perhaps we haven't looked so much at in relation to construction and things like that, especially as it's going to be having potentially 2 huge projects. And I know we've focused in the past, I know I've had my little pitch for agricultural support and getting people to agricultural college, but also when we've done a lot on sort of biotech and that, but have we taken into consideration those sort of skill sets? And obviously we wouldn't have done it for the scale that's going to be required if the Development Corporation goes ahead as foreseen. So just wondering if we're starting to factor that in or not, because it feels like that's going to be potentially a huge issue, which then makes the issue of construction even worse because people will be having to come in from all over the country, which then will cause even more disruption for local residents.
Yeah, so we're kind of a small fish in a big pond now, I think, on this work, if I can say that. But it's generally accepted that this work has been positive and successful, and we're talking to the various strategic authorities, so the Combined Authority, who have overall responsibility for skills, as well as colleagues at the Growth Company, to share with them how well we think this has gone, where we think there might be areas for expansion or change or modification. And I mean, it would be great if they would, you know, take that learning and make their plans with that in mind. So we're absolutely trying to share all the good things we've done.
Heather?
Based on the work that has been done, is sort of construction skill sets been something that you've looked at? And is there the skill sets currently to deal with what's to come potentially?
So I don't think I can answer that, to be quite honest, but I think in terms of how our small fish is contributing overall, for example, we're making sure that in any construction contract there's a commitment to X number of apprentices. For example, that's in addition to the work that we're funding through the kind of skills work stream. Overall, is Greater Cambridge prepared for what's yet to come? I think that's a broader discussion. And actually, some of the work that the Centre for Business Research have done will look at the kind of overall picture. But I think we probably need more information to be able to answer that, honestly.
I think on this point, Heather, it would be helpful to have a report on this, an overview, because there are a lot of initiatives now taking place. House Builders Federation, for example, Confederation, have got apprentice centres being developed in partnership with builders and subcontractors, prime subcontractors. So there is movement in this field, and through our partnership with Hill, we have 5% of people on site with apprentices. So the industry is working hard on addressing these skill issues, and it's been great to see youngsters learning how to lay bricks, and the amount of money they can earn when they're after about 3 years' experience is eye-watering. So it's a good industry to be in. It's high skilled and it's very well paid. So I think we're right to pick this up. But we'll have a discussion about how we might get some more information around this, because GCP might not necessarily be the best people to do this, but I think we do need to have a bit of an audit on it.
I would definitely welcome that, and that's come forward. And I do also think, rightly or wrongly, the focus in our area has been very sort of academic based, and you know, all about the biotech and everything like that. And what we need to make sure that whether somebody has a desk-based job or a manual job, that it's all respected, and that we don't create this two-tier of blue and white collar, which I have to say, I think our area has become prone to. Incredibly clever people work with their hands. It's when people talk about cleverness and things like that, I think it's wrong. Some people are more academic than others, but I think we need to get to a point where both skill sets are respected and given equal weight and value in our discussions.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. Parity of esteem has been a very long-held ambition. But as you know, education policies have tended to divide, create that divide, or reinforce that divide. Are we done on this work stream? Can we move on to 3, which is the smart work stream? 36, page 36 on your...
I just wonder whether...
Did you want to go back to skills?
No, I didn't. I just wanted to make a suggestion. Would it be a good idea to deal with this report along with the item that's on the agenda later?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. That's what you're here for. Thank you very much. So we'll do that one later on as a sort of fuller report on it. So we'll move on to 4 then, which is the housing work stream. Any questions? Heather?
This is my my sort of niche subject, I feel. So I'm just wondering, because as well, as we were saying earlier, governance is not straightforward in Cambridgeshire, and there's lots of different layers, so sometimes you're not quite sure what's coming through. But one of the things that I see as a planning committee member, and if I need to declare that interest, better do that, is because at the moment we don't have the land supply on self-builds that we are losing really good rural exception sites as a consequence. And there are occasions when, you know, we as a committee will still say no, but the inspectors do as the inspectors do. And I'm just wondering whether that's something that we're taking, whether that's been communicated to the GCP about that tilted balance for self-build, and if that's something that we are taking into consideration as we progress things forward. I appreciate it is a smaller part of what the GCP is doing, but it's still part of the work stream. And maybe there's some work to be done with people that come forward with self-build applications that aren't successful for those self-build. It would be good to see that the GCP sort of entering that field rather than what's currently happening, which is just more and more essentially market housing.
I'll talk to the planners and get some information and try and understand what the real impact is. Thanks for the suggestion.
As you're aware, there's a complex policy around self-build as well, but we're at the moment of the local plan consultation, so there's an opportunity to make further representations through that route. I'm speaking to everybody in the room as well. Are you done on that, Heather?
Yes, it's just you're right. It is something. If you're a planning committee member, you deal with it all the time. But when we're in tilted balance, with that presumption in favour of those, they are always, the rural exception sites are the first sites to go, but they are the best chance because. And I don't think everybody understands as well with the rural exception sites, that is the chance that we have to enable local people to secure those houses, because on an exception site, it doesn't matter where you are in the banding for affordable housing. If it's in a village where you have grown up and lived all your life, you will get given priority. And actually in the villages I represent, and a lot, I'm sure, of South Cambridgeshire, we have a huge issue now for our local schools and things because people are having to move out the area because they can't afford to live in those villages, which then affects the sustainability of those villages as well. So exception sites are a key way we get that, but we're losing the battle with them at the moment. I've got a village in my ward that is desperate for an exception site, but at the moment people know that they're better off going for a self-build and they can make more money. So yes, needs to be factored in, I think, when we look forward in future programming.
Others on housing. In that case, I'm moving on to 5, economy and environment workstream on 42 on the pack.
A question on Cambridge 2050. So there is no further mention in the more detailed report. Really just a feel, are we getting the voice that we would expect to get? Are we collaborating? Is there good liaison going on with that area? Thank you.
There's plenty of discussions going on. I think Councillor Williams said earlier on, we're a sort of crowded marketplace, aren't we, in Greater Cambridge? So the conversations are taking place. There are a lot of moving parts. There's clearly a degree of fluidity at the moment, but I think there is the will that this all lands in a place that supports our community and communities. So one can only hope that our endeavours will reach a sound conclusion. Thank you, Claire.
Well, you said a lot, Peter. I'm not sure.
You said a lot and said nothing.
Yeah, I think it was masterful. It was masterful. People perhaps want to think about something of.
Do we feel we have a voice? Is the real question. Do we feel we have a voice? You're saying there's a lot of discussion.
It's just really tricky stuff. Yeah. So there's a whole sort of strategic sort of narrative. There's a political narrative, and then there's a practical narrative, and those things need to come together because ultimately we can all talk about ambition, but I mean, and some of you have been dealing with for a number of years is some of the challenges of delivering on ambition. And we're talking greenways here, let alone something, you know, sort of markedly bigger. So I think that's the bit, you know, the ducks in the row concept. It's getting to that point will be great, but I think there's an awful lot of more work needs to go on, and the sheer proliferation of parties involved makes that challenging. But you know, I can only be confident that collectively we will get there, because otherwise, where else do we end up?
I mean, I think you could have referred to CSET and the autonomous bus between the two Park and Ride locations, serving the Adam Brooks, and all the smart technology that's going on to improve traffic and public transport access into Adam Brooks. I mean, you know, you're selling yourself short, Peter. I mean, GCP's doing a lot here. I mean, there's a lot of other parties involved making their own contributions, but we're doing significant stuff.
And I think that's right. But we are, to use sort of Neve's expression, we're a bit of a small fish in a large pond, and everybody needs to collectively come together. So if you are looking to sort of plot the managed sustainable development of this area with some of the numbers that are being talked about, everybody needs to step up. And it's not necessarily at the level we're currently operating on. It's a level beyond that. I mean, there's a sort of quote that, I think it's a Stephen Kelly quote, he'll shoot me if I've got it wrong. You know, it takes sort of 700 years to get the number of houses we've got now, and we're looking at over the next 25, 30 or 40 years to do a similar number. Yeah. So that's a huge ask, and the GCP needs to continue to do its work, as indeed do all of the other partners.
I didn't mention the grid reinforcement, in which you played a critical role, and you're a whale in that. So, sorry, Heta.
So it's on, you're pleased, I'm not going to pursue the previous line of questioning, but on paragraph 11.1, about the electricity grid, and it says that you're working with UK Power Network colleagues. When you're having those discussions, could you please re-emphasise that some people aren't just, you know, it's not just an inconvenience when there's power outages, it's medical equipment, it's things like your medication that needs to be refrigerated. And I say this because one of my villages has power cuts all the time. The village that I'm in, you know, we're sort of in this strange system. Some of us are on one network, some of the other. You know, we are having in our villages a lot of power cuts, not all of them, but some, and generators going down. And because the generators are so old, there doesn't seem to be that investment in what's already there as well. So it's great that we're reinforcing it to build that capacity going forward. You know, I had a village that was without power. I think in the end it was about 20 hours. Now, if you have medication in a fridge, if you have a baby like I did who was premature and reliant on express breast milk, that is all just going to get thrown, you can't create and get those things back. And it was, they got a replacement generator in as soon as they could, but I didn't feel that they really understood that this isn't just, you know, people can't watch Netflix for a few hours. So when you are having those conversations, could you remind them that actually we're in quite isolated places, and also a lot of people are reliant on it for heating as well, because we're an oil-based area, not everyone can afford that, so a lot of people are then using electric heating. If that's all right for me to plea when you have your conversations with them.
It was actually, apologies, a request for a reminder, because this UK electricity grid reinforcement was sort of stepping in at almost last minute. I recollect it, a huge success actually for GCP and what we did, so wonderful to see it progressing. Linking to the previous question, and Peter, what you just said, can you remind us how much capacity that gives us? So was this reinforcement designed to support the current local plan, future local plans? Do you recollect, I mean, just how far does this electricity grid reinforcement get us with the types of plans that are being discussed now?
Can I suggest I write to you with the information, because I'll get the numbers wrong if I bring them off the top of my head right
I
now.
think it's quite helpful, just, and
Yeah.
again, we won't necessarily do anything about it, but as we start to, we do have a role in learning for the future, and I think it'd be just a helpful thing to remind ourselves, because we talk a lot about water, but actually electricity doesn't come up as much, and I can't quite remember how far this gets us.
Thank you, Chair. I just didn't want us to overlook the second half of the page on page 42. It looks like it's part of the Economy and Environment Workstream report, but actually it isn't. And it actually says some really important thing, and I wanted to ask about that. So it seems really quite soon after we, at our last meeting, talked about the financial framework for the next financial year, that we get this information, which is talking about a growing cash flow deficit, which seems to be bound up with Section 106 funding. Not totally clear whether that's the only reason, but like confirmation about that. And then it talks then about the need for significant additional bridge funding to enable the delivery of our proposed programme on its current timetable. So I think I'm looking for some more about this, because it's really quite existential to the programme that we think we've got. Is this only a cash flow issue? So that implies a sort of time-related problem rather than a funding-related problem. I think I'm familiar with the fact that Section 106 money from developers isn't always arriving at the point that it's needed to pre-invest in infrastructure. Therefore, I'm wondering why there isn't a plan for this. What is the assumption, what was the assumption about how this cash flow gap would be dealt with? And at what point are we expecting to have a more detailed report about this? Because we can debate a lot, like we did earlier on, about green flags and red flags, but actually that whole table could be subject to significant change if I'm reading this these paragraphs correctly. So could someone say something a bit more to illuminate this for us?
So I think we picked up on the, so thank you for the question. I think we picked up on some of this during the budget discussion in the autumn, and we said that we would be bringing this back as part of the conversations later this year. In essence, the funding for the partnership comes from two sources. So £500 million from government grant, match funded locally, that is predominantly comes in through development contributions. The development contributions that link to the extant local plan that we are focused on, not the new one, the extant local plan, they will come in over a number of years. It's always been the idea, the understanding that they will come in over the number of years. And so the challenge for the city deal when it was set up and the challenge for the city deal now is just how do you manage the programme to reflect those income levels? So we are still some time away before this becomes an issue, but I think we have rightly brought it to members' attention, and as I say, we promised further information later this year as to exactly what that looks like. We're certainly nowhere near hitting the panic button anytime soon.
So,
Sorry, and there are other. Every time we've reported on the finance, actually the pot grows. So traditionally 106 contributions have just continued to go up because it reflects the level of development in our area. But as the chair has reminded me, there's also proposals now, both from the City Council and from South Cambridge, around the community infrastructure levy, which will then come in. One of the advantages, the distinct advantages on community infrastructure levy is its certainty, and it comes in much earlier in the development process. So that will be a significant benefit to the city deal as it feeds in. and we are watching and supporting our city and district colleagues closely on those developments.
And the other benefit of the SIL is that Section 106 contributions have to be tied to the development, so that rules out raising funding for wider strategic infrastructure somewhat distant from the site, but would serve it. So it creates a perfect regime for establishing the wider strategic infrastructure, which is what we need. Heather.
So, my question was going to be around SIL with that coming forward, because I know a lot of places have already moved to it. So my question was, because it's going to 29, how much of the money is already, although we don't know when, is secured by 106, and what's the gap? Because the only thing with SIL is that money, it's more certainty, but it still needs to spread across everything that's needed. It still needs to cover the affordable housing, it still needs to cover schools and everything else that goes with it as well. So yes, we have the flexibility to use it more strategically, I suppose, but equally it is a finite amount of money, whereas 106 we can normally secure how much is affordable, how much is for schools, etc. So I'm just wondering what the gap is, because obviously there will be some funds already secured by the 106 money from permissions already granted. I think that would be good to see.
So it will run parallel with the Section 106. So Section 106 will still exist. So you'll still secure the affordable housing from the Section 106 and the contributions towards local medical practices and schools and so on, as the standard 106 regime. But this introduces an additional sum for the strategic infrastructure, which we don't currently have. Yeah, it applies to all development.
Chair, if I can, not if it's under 1,000 square metres, the 106. Do you see, and that's
Yeah,
what,
there is a limit.
There's a limit, and that's what I'm saying. What is the uplift that we're going to get from SIL? That's why I'm asking for that sort of breakdown, what we're expecting, because part of the reason for bringing it in is all those things don't happen on developments under that square footage or under those numbers. And in the villages, actually the reason we want it is for that money to then be able to help the impact of the development there, not have it spent elsewhere. Do you see? I mean, that's why I'm asking what the proportions are going to be from SIL and maybe from strategic and from minor sites.
And that's a really important question, but it's not a question we give the answer to.
Yeah.
It's a question that our council partners who are raising the SIL will then feed through to us. Our papers, when we presented in our budget papers when we presented in the autumn, said there is more money coming in than the cost of the programme. And SIL will add to the money coming in. The issue is just around when you spend the money on the programme as opposed to when the money comes in. So that's the bit that we've got, and we've got some period of time to work through that. And as answer to the original question, we will bring back an update and have a conversation around that. But you're absolutely right about the SIL question, and we're relying on the Joint Director of Planning and others to assist us in that.
It's not all the strategic infrastructure. There's also a percentage for communities too, which would benefit the villages. So it's on consultation. Have a look. It's a good read. Okay. Councillor Pick.
Yeah, just to come back on the question, I think I absolutely get it that we're looking at a dynamic picture here, and that it's quite difficult to put it to know what it is at any one point in time. But if we are going to have a transparent view and check on this, then I think a time has to be selected at which we get the picture at that time. And I know it's always tempting to wait until we know a little bit more, and then we never actually see that picture. So we have 2 further meetings this year. Which of the 2 meetings are we going to have the report in?
It'll be the November meeting. The November meeting.
Christopher, thank you for it.
Well, thank you. I think Peter perhaps has answered this, going back to the original question, notwithstanding the intricacies of Sil might pull some money in sooner than 106, and that's not, as you say, really our business. But the question of whether we can at the moment foresee that ultimately the right amount of money will be available, even if there is a gap in the short term. You've indicated that we, the GCP, are not in control of whether the statutory bodies actually flow that money in the right direction, right time. That's an interesting consideration. But I think what you've just said, though, is you can see a path to all the money we need to continue to complete the programme. It is a question of when it comes in from the relative council. Thank you.
I'll attempt to sum up that lot. I'll just pick out the main points and perhaps the messages that sent from the Assembly to the board. Would request that bring their attention to the Trisham Trail and the need to encourage Network Rail to assist in the implementation of that. You've called for an exemplification of changes to the RAG ratings, and we'll be looking at preparing an overview of skills training in the construction industry. And also there'll be a note on the planned grid reinforcement and plus future grid capacity. And I'm aware that Cambridge Ahead have already produced a very good report on that, so that might be a good point of reference. And there's going to be a report brought forward on the GCP's capital cash flow. And there are other points that were raised by Heather in relation to rural exception sites, which is a local planning matter as well. There will be a further report on junctions on the Hills Road, as Tim has requested. So that's the summary. Are we all happy with that? Thank you. Ian?
Sorry if I missed you say it. Did you cover the request I made about having a workshop?
Oh, of course, sorry, yes. That's not so much for the board. Noted, but thank you very much, and good idea. Okay, so we're moving on to item 7, which is Barton Greenway, the Bolt Path. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the public questions and responses to them. We've got a representation from a partner body representative, responsive as that's required. We'll then receive the officer presentation and then we'll have our debate. When we get to the debate, we're being invited to consider the proposals that will be presented to the Executive Board, and we'll comment on the recommendations. So there's 2 points about that. There's the methodology, the refined methodology that's been used to predict the numbers of future users, and also the agreement to proceed with the delivery of the Bolt Path element of Barton Greenway. So the people are going to be asking questions. Can I invite Linda Jones, please? Linda is speaking on behalf of Cambridge Living Streets, and her question also relates to items 8 and 9. And this looks like a scenario from Russia with Putin sitting at one end and someone else sitting at the other. Linda, welcome. You've got 3 minutes.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is being asked at the beginning of question 7, but it actually, item 7, but it actually relates to item 9 and item 8 as well. So this seemed the most important point at which to offer the question. Cambridge Living Streets welcomes further progress on the greenways, and we fully support the work on the entry points to the city from the Comberton Greenway, making Adams Road and Sirjik Avenue safer and much more accessible for walkers and wheelers by creating footways and restricting motor traffic. And this, of course, is going to be needed for all the greenways as they enter the city. It's one of the things, as Cambridge Living Streets, that we're particularly concerned about. Fast cycling, cycling clashing with motor traffic, pedestrians clashing with motor traffic, all those things are problematic for us. Reflecting more widely on the Greenways programme, we noticed that the language and focus have evolved, and we're very pleased about that. The business cases identified benefits all related to cycling into Cambridge. Journey time saving, increased safety of the cycle network, a reduced road traffic for motorists, so it can go faster, I suppose, environmental improvements, health benefits, and improved connectivity. However, looking at the Comberton and Barton Greenway papers, items 7 and 8, both state, quote, the creation of an extended 150 kilometre network of greenways is part of a strategy to encourage people to walk, wheel and cycle into Cambridge to help reduce traffic congestion and contribute toward improved air quality and better public health. So you notice the shift in language here from the focus largely, almost entirely on cycling, to walkers and wheelers being key and they're up front. So this represents an important shift to a wider definition of active travel, which has happened over the last few years, acknowledging the importance of walkers and wheelers whose health, safety, connectivity and journey time also benefit from the Greenways programme. In the light of this, Cambridge Living Streets asks GCP, first of all, a question about data collection. What data does GCP gather? How does it gather feedback on how walkers and wheelers are using greenways? And what does this reveal about lessons and patterns of use? We do a lot of walks all over Cambridge, including parts of greenways. And from our limited observation, walkers and wheelers use shorter stretches of greenways, walk for leisure, work and health benefit. Many are older people, some using mobility aids, as well as families with young children. So we need to look at the data. What is it telling us about how they use them and how differently they might use them to how cyclists use them? Safety, of course, here is the key. Secondly, ask a question about amenities. Are there plans to provide amenities to support walkers and wheelers, such as seating, shade, and adequate lighting? And indeed signage, because there are some sharp bends on greenways where we need to make sure that cyclists don't go around too fast and that walkers and wheelers are not in danger. As valued users of greenways, there needs to be a step change in provision for them beyond the rhetoric that walkers and wheelers are welcome, to a rhetoric, to a provision that means that walkers and wheelers feel really welcomed and protected on the greenways. Quite a lot of the greenways don't have any demarcation. If you have a lot of cyclists and you have a lot of walkers, there's potential for conflict.
Time.
We need to be very clear that that doesn't happen to the detriment of the more vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And Thomas is going to answer.
Thank you very much for your question. So we work very closely with the County Council's Data Insight team, and we gather information on the numbers of users walking and wheeling on all of our schemes. And a lot of that is utilising the Veracity network that we have in place. Projects such as the Chisholm Trail show a significant increase in people walking and wheeling when our projects have been implemented. All the Greenway projects have been designed to incorporate elements from the GCP's Green and Blue Infrastructure Strategy that went through this assembly, that includes recommendations for placement of items such as benches and litter bins. Design of lighting for the greenways has been chosen in consideration to the environment within which they pass, but as a minimum, solar studs will be provided to facilitate guidance along the rural sections of the greenways. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So can I invite Josh Grantham, please? Josh is an Assembly regular and is representing CamCycle.
Thank you.
You know the form. 3 minutes. Thank you.
CamCycle welcomes the strengthened business case for the bulk path and the clearer articulation of the benefits of the scheme. It's encouraging to see the GCP address several of the uncertainties previously raised by Assembly members and bring forward a proposal that is both deliverable and good value for money. While the bulk may appear to be a relatively small section of infrastructure, it in fact sits as a central link within a much wider web of current and future routes. Without it, opportunities to create a coherent connected network towards Hassingfield, Grantchester, Barton Road and West Crane Bridge will be extremely challenging. In that context, this is not simply a local path improvement, but a foundational part of the wider Greenway network. Delivering it now helps to unlock more affordable and realistic options for surrounding routes in the future and avoids locking in poorer connectivity for many years in the future. So, will the GCP commit to delivering monitoring of the route with an active travel counter so we can ensure the success of the scheme is monitored going forward? Thank you.
Thomas is going to respond.
Thank you very much. The GCP is keen to monitor the success of all of our projects, and active travel counters form a key part of this monitoring, along with surveys and interviews of users where appropriate. We're looking at options to introduce an active travel counter along this section of the Greenway at the moment. Thank you.
Much. Am I understand, Josh, that you are leaving? Well, can I take the opportunity to thank you for all the contributions you've made for this Assembly over the years and the promotion of cycling and safe cycling in the city and elsewhere. Thank you. Can we acknowledge that in the minutes, please? Thank you. Linda Worth, and Linda Worth is from the British Horse Society. Thank you, Linda.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for accepting my question. It's not clear from the report on the bulk path whether the entire bulk path corridor, including both the existing natural surface route and the proposed new constructed path, will be formally recorded on a definitive map and statement as a public bridleway, thereby securing lawful equestrian and multi-user access in perpetuity. Can the committee confirm the intended legal status of the full route following delivery of the scheme, please? If the whole of the route is to be dedicated and protected as a public bridleway, the British Horse Society supports the project in principle while maintaining its preference for construction approaches that minimise environmental impact and retain a rural character rather than extensive urban-style sealed surfacing in the countryside. If any part of the route is proposed at a status that excludes equestrian access, the Society would need to withdraw that support. The report acknowledges that the existing permissive bridleway is a rural route with a natural surface. It is therefore essential that the scheme secures 1. Adequate measures and funding to protect the existing natural surface route during construction, preventing damage, compaction or loss of rural character. 2. Provision for appropriate reinstatement and repair of the existing route following construction works. And 3. A long-term maintenance programme to retain a usable rural natural surface option alongside any new surfaced route. Can the committee confirm that these legal protections, funding commitments and ongoing maintenance arrangements will be secured as part of the project? Whilst I'm here, I would like to say that the Society appreciates the support from Thomas and the team for equestrian inclusion in their projects. Their support in trying to resolve the issues which are currently preventing that inclusion is also appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And Thomas?
Thank you very much for the question. So officers are working with the landowner to secure a Section 25 agreement, which would see the creation of a legal bridleway across the entirety of the width of the Bulk Path. The new surface will be alongside the existing surface that's utilised. The current proposals allow for a section of land to be leased from the landowner on a temporary basis, so the other side, for the creation of the permanent greenway construction that would prevent the need to disturb the existing natural surface route during construction. Future maintenance of the route will be covered through an agreement between the County Council and GCP, which will include appropriate funding. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I now ask Councillor Hugh Clough, the Cambridge City Council for Newnham Ward, to speak? Thank you.
If you could refer to the slides as I go through my comments. Slide 1 above reminds us of what we're talking about. The Bulk Path is a precious, unspoiled, much-loved countryside footpath on the edge of Cambridge, with lovely views to the west and back towards Cambridge from the southern end. Many residents are appalled at the proposal to change it into an engineered hard surface greenway. Slide 2. Slide 2, taken from the report, shows its location and context. The Bulk Path runs from the Coton Road in Grantchester in a broad loop north and east to Grantchester Road. It is not on any natural desire line for commuting cyclists. From Barton, cyclists will and do take the fastest straight blue route into Cambridge. The green route from point 6 on this may attract cyclists heading towards Grantchester, towards Trumpington, through Grantchester towards Trumpington and then Addenbrooks, but not Cambridge-bound cyclists, as they would involve a longer, much more complex route compared with either Grantchester Road or across the meadows. Similarly, cyclists from Grantchester will only choose the Grantchester Road route or across the meadows. We know this from surveys carried out by Ian Steen, the then Grantchester Parish Council member in 2018, which he repeated a month or so ago. The bulk was not an option for them. Slide 3. Thank you. After listening to the discussion about this item at the GCP exec last July, the Mayor, Paul Bristow, made this simple request: for GCP to go back, consult with the people who answered the original consultation, and then undertake a meaningful review. We came away from that meeting with a clear understanding that this is what GCP had agreed to. This has simply not happened. We have heard nothing from the GCP until this report and the technical note appeared a week ago. Slide 4, please. Table 2 in the report argues that the cycling numbers will increase 15 times and pedestrians 17 times. This is simply not believable for this off-route pathway. The GCP has failed to engage as requested and provided a set of data at short notice which needs proper scrutiny. This item should not be moved forward with an option A recommendation to the GCP executive, as fair process has not been followed. Option B, removal, or indeed deferral, is the only logical way forward at this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I okay to pick up those points as I go through the presentation?
So Thomas is just going to go straight into the presentation, and your challenges will be met, will be addressed during that presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair. And first of all, can I just introduce to the left of me the project manager for the scheme, Jonathan Camp, and our business case lead, Stephen Henderson from WSP, who've come to answer any questions related to specifics I can't answer. As you'll be aware, the board approved the full business case for the Barton Greenway in July of last year. However, concerns were raised about the bike path, and we were asked to go away and do a technical review and come back to the board with our recommendation as to whether to continue or not. As you can see from the report, we've gone away and done that work, and we are recommending that it's progressed. And the main reasons for this are as follows. Firstly, we've updated the methodology in terms of forecast demand in line with DFT's kind of updated appraisal toolkit that has demonstrated numbers of approximately 300 users a day. That means that from a benefit cost ratio perspective, it results in a BCR of £2.20 back for every pound that you spend. In addition, it's highlighted that having an off-road route will provide attractive to users who are less confident of utilising the route alongside the A603. And that's another reason that we put forward it as a good solution. And finally, the additional benefits it provides, including environmentally. So in terms of biodiversity net gain, we have submitted a planning application for the entirety of the route. And the elements of biodiversity net gain are crucial alongside the bike path, where we are improving watercourses that run along there. So overall, we're recommending that this scheme does continue, and we're happy to take any questions that members might have. Thank you.
Councillor Pick.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the officers for the further information and numbers, which certainly fill out the picture a bit. So I've been quite a supporter right from the beginning of the Greenways programme, but I have to say that I remain sceptical about this. I actually can recognise all of the positive things that Thomas just described if we look only at what's in front of us. But I think our view ought to be one that is wider than that in terms of all of the undertakings that we've got as a partnership and the sort of the strategic mission that goes with that. And I find it quite difficult to say that this bike path passes the test that is would be necessary to say this would be the right priority for the money involved, because it is really a second route to another one that is part of a network, achieving somewhat the same thing, and it is not a very direct desire line really for very much. And I think I know enough about cycling to know that cyclists are overwhelmingly influenced by a desire line rather than whether there is a path. And I do question a bit the analogy with the Chisholm Trail, which to me was a really strategic piece of infrastructure, and you only have to think of the number of concentrations of places where people live and work along its stretch to understand that that is nothing comparable with this case. So I personally wouldn't sort of disagree with any of the objectives that have been described behind this, but I just think if you think that we have spent no money in the centre of Cambridge since we started, where thousands of people experience transport conflicts between all modes, and this looks like, even if people will tell me that it isn't it, but it looks like that this is kind of quite an easy project to do, and doing things in the city centre where thousands of people are involved is quite a difficult thing to do. So let's do this one. And I'm not sure that it correctly honours what we were created for. Much that I appreciate all of the public health arguments that have been mentioned, you know, there are lots of things that have merits that don't fit with our strategic purpose, and I just feel that possibly is one of those. And so I've not really been reinforced. My scepticism remains, really.
Nicola?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with everything that Councillor Bick has just said. My points would be similar, that it appears to be a second route when there are alternative routes which are created by desire lines. It only links smaller roads, so it's currently existing as a bridleway, and while it's desirable to have it as a roadway, people are going to be following the road unless it's more leisure, I feel, rather than, and while that is an aspect of the greenways, as Councillor Bick said, I just don't feel that there's going to be the uplift that is reflected here. I don't understand the massive change in the uplift, so maybe that'd be something that can be explained a little bit more. Compared to the 4 users, suddenly we're having so many more. And also, again, the choice of the comparison with Chisholm Trail, it doesn't ring true that a pathway as a bridleway, which doesn't link any major centres, is comparable to the Chisholm Trail, which has 2 train stations, business parks, housing. So I just would like a little bit more information to be able to understand some of the information that we've got in the business case here.
Heather, please.
This is going to sound unusual because it's like we're role reversing in that I actually think that what has been proposed, now that we have the safeguards for equestrians and we've been told it's going to be alongside the bulk path, I think it would be sensible to proceed with this, which normally I'm on the other side, so this is a bit of a strange feeling, Chair. But I personally don't think that the route that the parish council and the people of Grantchester are so opposed to should be something that's forced through when there is an alternative. If confident cyclists still really want to take that direct route, there is a road that they can go on. Nobody's saying they can't go on the road. Yeah, let's put this in perspective. Do you know what? Some people may be in absolute horror if you come to most of my villages. We don't even have a footpath, let alone a cycleway. And pedestrians, cyclists, cars, tractors, lorries, we all seem to manage our way through. So nobody's saying that we're going to put barriers up and cyclists can't use the normal roads like they do everywhere across the city and indeed the country. Although I wouldn't advise it on some of our dual carriageways. But I have seen people cycle on dual carriageways. Not for me, but good luck to them. Whereas here, we have the opportunity to offer something that will appeal to perhaps those people that are less confident. And we are so for me, I was concerned at the last meeting because obviously we had this conflict with the Horse Society, and I thank officers that took away the recommendation to speak with them. I'm going to joke. It's the fact that I'm agreeing with something. It's obviously having an adverse impact. So we're at a position where there's something that is favoured by more people and work's gone into it and a compromise. And I struggle to see why we wouldn't take that and why we wouldn't push that forward. And I do hear what's said about, there are issues in the city and a lot of time is spent on, city projects and things like that. But this is Greater Cambridge, so it is okay to do some things for the villages and South Cambs as well. And had we still had the conflict with the bridleway, then I wouldn't be supportive. But as that has been resolved, and I would stress before it goes to the Assembly, actually, I'm looking at the map, it was displayed earlier, page 57. Thank you very much. What might help, I think, when I was trying to read this, part of the difficulty I had was because that green goes shared use path, and then you've got the bridleway sort of coming in, which is then described as quiet road and what have you. It might actually be better to have the bridleway, even if it's 2 lines that are side by side, just to make it really clear that this is not taking away the bridleway. So for those members that have not heard me so supportive of something before, shows it can happen. But yeah, and after all this work and all this compromise and everybody coming together, I just don't understand why we would have done all of that to then go, do you know what, we're going to go with the thing that you felt so passionately about, you took us to court over. I mean, that just doesn't make sense in my view. Sorry, Chair, there we go.
I hope that wasn't too difficult for you. I got Claire then, Christian.
That's fine, I'll say something as well.
The reason that I brought up the bulk path not looking very logical at the last meeting is still true for me, in that commuters coming from the west of Cambridge, Barton, etc., cannot get to the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, for example, at all safely with this still. So there's no connection between Grantchester and Trumpington and the hospital. And whilst you have mitigated some of the issues, I was compelled only by the BNG argument, to be honest, in the paper. So for me, there's still a gap in cycling for commuter purposes between Grantchester and Trumpington is a road that is worthy of putting some traffic slowing or something relatively inexpensive. Whilst this is not an expensive addition to our plans, it is clearly not strategic if you look at the map. It is a nice to have, I think, and therefore for me I would still revert to spending the money on making some more strategic routes safer rather than this additional. For me it's a leisure route, which is a beautiful path. You could spend 50k probably opening up some gates, putting a little bit of crossing on some of the wetter parts, rather than spending nearly 2 million on a bigger transition. I listened to Josh's arguments. I can see why it is strategic, but it's nothing like as strategic as the other roads that we've got to sort out. So I'm half compelled, but actually still feel that it isn't the right thing to do with the amount of money that it will still cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you. I'd just like to register an observation. Again, thank you for the work that's been done to take into account the bridleways. And actually, I think it's a comment of all of the papers that we've had today, including the Sidgwick, that there's obviously been a really good responsiveness, and that's come through in the responses. So I want to thank officers for that. I do support this and would be supportive of it going forward for two reasons. One, I do think it's strategic. Councillor Paul, their part next to me has the Hazelingfield Greenway up. I think it also does link and support that. And more importantly, I am a mother of children. I have a lot of employees with young children. People coming from Barton are not particularly confident crossing the motorways and we're going alongside on that bridge. That hasn't come up, but that is, it's not just any old path along the alternative route does have some jeopardy, and there is a large proportion of people living in Barton and then Comberton on, for whom I think if you're cycling from Comberton, actually this would actually, if you then put it on the scale, this is not a meaningful detour and it is almost in the sight lines. I don't buy the arguments that have been made that I appreciate that it doesn't solve the problem for the biomedical campus, one that's obviously very close to my heart, but we're not being presented with a choice. I don't think this is supposed to solve that problem. I agree we should register that, as it would be a nice thing to look at. Similarly, I agree that there's not much in the centre of Cambridge, and we're going to come on to, but I don't feel we've been offered a choice here. We're not being saying we can't do this and there is another alternative. We're just being asked to say, is this a scheme that has merits? And in light of its links to Hazelingfield and avoiding the motorway junctions and riding alongside those very busy roads, I do think it has merit.
Yeah, Lisa next.
I'll be very, very brief, Chairman. I think the world has gone mad. I agree with Heather. The world really has gone mad, but, I came here expecting a lot less objections to this, to be honest. It's not a part of the world I know massively well, so I can't say I've used that road, but I look at it on the map and I'm like, if I could do anything to avoid using it, I probably would as a cyclist, because I've used similar roads and it's very, very scary. I don't think that the comparison with the Chisholm Trail is intended to be comparable in terms of what it connects and how many people use it. I now use the Chisholm Trail every day, and it took a little getting used to, because I was used to going on Milton Road, and I was used to having cars, you know, come behind me, and it was just the way it was. And I thought, I'm going to be in the middle of nothing, I'm going to have no, you know, maybe I'm not sure. But once you use it, you don't really go back because it's so much easier. And if I lived around there, I would do exactly the same thing. I'd be feeling like, you know, even if it's not exactly on my desired line, and by the way, people that cross through and do like incredibly difficult things on an inclined, muddy slope near the cam, how they do, and you can see that they do it because there's massive tracks everywhere, they're mad. You know, we've given them something safe, please use it, appeal. But I would use that because it would be so much more convenient and so much less, you know, I don't have to think about somebody killing me if I'm cycling along. I can switch my mind off a little bit more. So I think I would quite like that. I don't think, well, I agree with Christina, and I think if we could find a way to make it somehow at some point end up at the biomedical campus or at West Cambridge, it would be great. But that's probably for the future. But you know, Councillor Bick knows I love him very much, but we did have a rather ambitious idea for how we would spend the money in Cambridge to solve the problem of Cambridge. It wasn't me that stood in the way of that. I don't particularly think that there is any use for this money in solving the traffic problem in Cambridge, so it's not an argument I buy. Please build it, but, you know, whatever you like, really.
So we've got Paul.
Thank you. Yeah, when I first looked at this, when I first saw this, maybe 2 or 3 years ago when it came to the Assembly, I was a little bit doubtful about this, but I have, over time, changed my mind, and I've been and visited the site. I've cycled through Grantchester, over the A6, on the A603, over the M11, and then when I got out the map this morning, it was blindingly obvious that this is the right thing to do. Because if you're coming from Haslingfield or Barton or probably Comberton, the route that is going to be most desirable is the Bald Path route. Crossing the M11, crossing the roundabout afterwards, then cycling beside the A603 is great for confident cyclists. But what we're trying to do here is encourage people who haven't been cycling, that they want to start cycling. And this route will be the quiet route, and it will encourage those new cyclists that we want to see. There is very much a parallel where I live in Waterbeach, where there are options. You can either cycle alongside the A10, or you can go beside the river on a fairly rough path, or you can go down the newly surfaced Mere Way. And most people I speak to avoid the route by the main road. It's not, the other routes are not necessarily the most direct routes, but you really, really do want to, if you want to do this every day, you need to enjoy it. You need to have a route that you're going to like doing every day. So I'm strongly in favour of this.
Ian?
I'm a bit like Paul. I've ummed and ahed a bit about this specifically, and I don't think the report is helped by the wording of 2.9, where it says evidence from comparable schemes. And like Elisa said, I think what we actually mean is this is basically, if you build infrastructure, they will come. That's the comparison with the Chisholm Trail. And I remember the Chisholm Trail very well. And I remember all the arguments against it and how it was not going to go anything, and no one was going to use it. And whilst it's not going to generate, this scheme is not going to generate the same numbers as the Chisholm Trail, it will generate numbers. I think also, I looked at I don't share the scepticism about the route checker tool. I did just look it up, and it is a particularly janky, and that's a very technical term, a particularly janky spreadsheet produced by the DFT that looks like it's been done by someone in crayon with colours all over it. And it's very hard to fucking even get up my screen, but it is detailed, and it does go through another analysis, so I can easily see how it would produce uplift numbers that are quoted in the report. But overall, for me, the strategic context of this is this scheme strategic? Is overall a network of greenways strategic, which encourages people in general to have as many opportunities to cycle and walk as possible which might mean they cycle and walk down this one because they use it, or even they just visit it, which might mean they cycle and walk down another route as well, which they wouldn't normally. And that, for me, is the strategic context, and that's why I support it.
That's merited the discussion that we've had. My perspective on this is that our whole lives are guided by basically instrumental transactions. What's the value for money? Is it obvious to us? And we overlook actually what is priceless, which is quality of life. And these are the routes that make Cambridge very special, a very special place to live. And we have a lot of cyclists in the city, and to be able to come out into the countryside and just use these routes is frankly just a joy. And so I think this is something we need to do within our whole thing. We can't. This is not a pick and mix. This is not Woolworths picking out, you know, the cheap bits or the expensive bits. Sorry, that was for the older generation. Let's say it went into liquidation and shareholders share the profits. So I'm in support, and I'm afraid those people who are opposed are in a minority on this occasion. So that will be the message we send back to the board. There are two options. Well, you want to go to a vote. I mean, I've never known Tim to take the vote in 4 years. Or maybe you did once. Do you want to do a vote?
I think we should acknowledge that there was dissent. It wasn't a unanimous.
Yeah, secret ballot. Okay, so this. Well, I'm very happy to do that. I'm all in favour of elections. So am I. Good.
Chair, I'm not pressing for a vote. I can see the minority from the way people have spoken. But you resolve as you wish, but I think it is resolved, isn't it?
Subject to the caveat, there was minority, well, there's a majority supporting and minority against. That
Can we ask that there is some more? I mean, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't interrupt you, Chair. But I was wondering whether we could ask that there is some consideration given and some, perhaps, that someone spends a few more words thinking about ways in which we could make this more obvious for a connection to some of the big places that people clearly want to go to. Because I think that connection can be made in thought, if not in bricks yet. And maybe we can have that a bit more.
I think what the officers will do is they will present a feedback from the Assembly that reflects the discussion that we've had. Now I've mentioned that. So effectively then what we're saying is we pursue option A, 4.1 on page 61 on this one, and it'll have an accompanying narrative that reflects the very helpful discussion that we've had. So thank you for that one. So we move on then to the next agenda item, which is Compton Greenway, Sidgwick Avenue. And for this one, we have more, I think we've got a question. So I'll go to the public questions first. We'll have responses to them. There's Councillor Clough will return again as a partner body representative. We'll have the officer's presentation, and then we'll have the debate. The matters in front of us then are to consider the implementation of the experimental traffic regulation order for Sidgwick Avenue, consider the immediate safety accessibility improvements, including a new footway to the street, note the requirement for officers to present findings of the proposed trial scheme to the Executive Board with a recommendation on whether to implement a permanent TRO or just to remove the ETRO completely, and that's going to take up to 18 months. And then note the longer-term opportunities for the Phase 2 scheme, incorporating further accessibility improvement, full resurfacing of the carriageway. I can't wait for that. Placemaking, heritage considerations, and enhanced biodiversity and urban greening. So if I can ask Thomas Foyts, I'm not sure I've pronounced your name correctly, forgive me, who's been in correspondence with us, and your letters or your emails are being circulated to members of the Assembly, Thomas. So you have 3 minutes.
Excellent. Thanks very much. I'm Thomas Foyts. I'm a PhD student at the university. Just wanted to express my wholehearted support for the Sidgwick Avenue scheme. I use it daily to get to West Cambridge, the university sport facility, and towards Eddington. The proposed scheme is a great solution. Alternative roads have cars driving alongside, going 30 miles an hour, and Burrells Walk is already quite busy. The proposed pedestrian improvements, as well as the blocking of through traffic, are great solutions. In other words, so far, and for drivers as well, there's the opportunity to just use West Road, which is far better designed than Sidgwick anyway. Overall, great solution. Sidgwick Avenue's road surface is in exceptionally poor condition. The road is literally longitudinally split in half for about 20 yards on the side of Grange Road. And on the other side of the road, it's held together by a bunch of patchwork pothole fixes. And despite the best efforts, no doubt, of the council, these pothole fixes don't hold particularly long, or new potholes regularly appear right next to where the old ones were, right next to a fix. In other words, I suggest that the proposed patch and repair work that's part of this ETRO will probably only last for the duration of the ETRO and won't be a longer-term fix. So I'd like to ask you, could you please commit, as part of Phase 2 or otherwise, to a long-term solution for the servicing of this road, while also ensuring that the roots or the trees themselves that are already on the road don't quickly destroy any potential fix you may implement. And separately, given this scheme has now been in planning between 3 and 5 years, it's a road of 1/4 mile. So I should suggest there might be some urgency here now to proceed particularly a bit faster. Could you make sure or consider advising the executive as part of your discussions here today to make all human resource capital or otherwise necessary means available to make sure that quite a bit of the design work for such a Phase 2 or the consultation work with all stakeholders are done within the 18-month time frame, so that after the 18 months, mostly only the data analysis part or data collection part needs to be done, and also to ensure, while also the university representatives who are here today ensure that any proposed solutions as part of Phase 2 or otherwise are quickly and speedily responded to, and there's no further delays. Because I understand from the past that consultation with stakeholders has substantially delayed this scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thomas will answer.
Thank you very much for your support for the proposed scheme. For the initial temporary solution, we are proposing to patch the worst of the potholes along the existing carriageway to ensure that the maximum benefit of the scheme is realised through the trial. If the trial is successful, a decision will be required from the Executive Board to implement the permanent scheme, and we want to come back to the Executive Board before the end of the trial to make that decision so that there's continuity. As part of that kind of next stage and subject to Executive Board approval, we'd then work with the County Council as the Highways Authority on the maintenance to be carried out with the permanent scheme, including options for resurfacing. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll ask Josh Grantham. This is his comeback tour. Thank you.
Thanks. One final time. Before I get to the Camp Cycle question, I lived on Grange Road and I had the pleasure of using this street every day, and it's such a beautiful part of the city. and just, yeah, you know, so infuriating also at that time to see the kind of imperfect situation that was existing there. So much so that I got into quite a heated argument with the master of the college and about kind of his belief that nothing could be done to make it better. And it was therefore really refreshing just to catch up with GCP officer Rory coming in here about how the engagement with the stakeholders has gone, Selwyn being one of them, and taking them through that journey of like, what's the problem? How do we get a solution? How do we bring people on board? So that's my personal anecdote. CamCycle strongly supports option A for Sidgwick Avenue. The proposals are robust, evidence-based, and address a clear and urgent accessibility failure on this street. For many people, including disabled people and less confident cyclists, Sidgwick Avenue is effectively unusable. Option A has the potential to transform daily journeys for thousands of people and represents one of the best value for money schemes in the programme. We welcome the intention to use an experimental traffic regulation order. This creates an opportunity to think differently about engagement. Traditional consultation processes overrepresent those who object, rather than reflecting the experiences of people who actually use the streets every day, or those who are currently excluded from using it. If the purpose of the scheme is to improve accessibility and to enable new journeys, then engagement should focus on understanding the needs of new and mobility impaired users and evaluate real-world experiences both now in the existing bad condition and after implementation of the ETRO. So, will the GCP commit to an engagement approach for Sidgwick Avenue that actively seeks a proportional and representative picture of street users, including those currently excluded, rather than relying primarily on objection-led responses? Thank you.
Firstly, thank you very much to CamCycle for their continued engagement on this project. It's been very helpful. We currently have our vivacity sensors capturing quantitative data for how the street functions, and this data set will continue throughout the proposed ETRO trial. Alongside this, we'll be undertaking surveys and interviews before and during the ETRO trial to provide a qualitative data set to report back to the board. So it'll be both quantitative and qualitative. Both these data sets will be used in conjunction with the feedback received through the ETRO process, enabling us to capture the views and opinions of all the user groups of the street and feed it back to the board in due course. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're going to invite now Councillor Hugh Clough, Cambridge City Councillor for Newnham Ward.
Thank you. I've been asked since I was here by my colleague, Councillor Jean Glasberg, who's been working on this and consulting with the local Residents Association of Old Newnham Rayon, asked if I could make the following 3 points. Sidgwick Avenue is in an appalling state of disrepair and unsafe at present for pedestrians, cyclists and vehicles. Option A seems to address most of the issues raised by residents, but there are still concerns about some aspects of it. We welcome the fact that this order is experimental and ask that the GCP makes the most of this opportunity to engage fully with residents and local councillors to achieve the best possible results for this key part of the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thomas, can you please introduce the report?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. So, as members will be aware, Sidgwick Avenue is a key part of the Compton Greenway at the end of the scheme, routing into the city, and it has a number of key destinations along it, including multiple colleges and university buildings. In terms of users, you can see in figure 2 of the report that over 70% are either walking or wheeling along the road. However, a number of issues exist, especially related to safety and accessibility. Due to the large mature trees, large parts of the pavement are inaccessible and are forcing users onto the road, and you can see that again in figure 3 of the report. Therefore, our new proposal is to put in drop-down bollards and close the road for through traffic. This will result in significant reduction in motorised users and will allow us to provide build-outs around the trees so that there is better continuity of pavements, both improving safety and accessibility. We're looking to do this for a 12 to 18-month trial where we'll be gathering feedback on how it's going in order to inform a fuller scheme in the future, subject to the board's approval. Lastly, I just wanted to highlight that the development of this proposal has been a highly collaborative exercise, and I understand members will have seen a large number of kind of emails and letters of support from various colleges and stakeholders, and just a big thank you to the team for the amount of work that's gone into that work. Thank you.
So, can those people who experience the Sidgwick Avenue rodeo on cycle or on walking, would you like to go first and share your experiences with the Assembly? Claire and then Ian.
Okay, that was a good vote. I fully support doing this work. It looks good value and I think is needed. A general point about the bollards, which I fully support. I like bollards that are movable, because what I've seen in some of the other significant network situations that we have seen around Cambridge, where we've put in those great big heavy flower beds instead of bollards that can be moved, is if we have something like the water mains bursting on Abraham Road or Long Road being closed due to flooding or train works, we can't move those great big flower beds, whereas we can move bollards like these. So that's the general point, but coming from strong support for the scheme. Thank you.
Very succinct, thank you. Ian.
I think, Chair, probably like a lot of this, I use this roughly once a year when there's an election on. I've got to get to the count. I just want to reflect about 12 years ago, I made a series of very, very bad puns on radio about the song New York, New York, because I was trying to push the idea of aping the New York experience of doing experimental schemes. And it's great now, we've done a few, Mill Road being another. But I do want to really, really push both to CAN Cycle and to the GCB office. This isn't ambitious enough, and this isn't ambitious about the way you do experimental schemes. Right? You need to have several options and several positions. That's an evidence-based approach, because the whole point of this is point of doing live consultations and getting the evidence through that is you don't know what the results are. So you try it in different positions through the scheme, because there will be unexpected consequences no matter how much data you've collected up front. So please, can we consider recommending that we don't just do one option, because that's not using the best use of experimental traffic orders.
Thank you. Welcome the report and thank the officers, and particularly also for all the work that's been done to consider all of the aspects of this as experienced by others. I strongly support option A. I think it's really important. I like the use of the experimental thing. I just have two things I think we need to be mindful of. I'm sure the officers are already aware. I have some experience of roadways involving tree roots. Resurfacing that road fully is going to be a very, very difficult thing without further damaging the trees, which are, of course, what gives that particular avenue its unique character. So using the experimental order will give you time to consider how you can do that without further damaging the trees. And the second part, of course, is those trees won't last forever, sadly, and their life will not be helped by the fact it is and always has been a roadway of sorts. Can we make sure that any long-term scheme also includes allowing to replant in between all of those trees the next generation that will be looking as wonderful in 100 years' time as it does at the moment, and safer, of course. Thank you.
Sinan and then Tim.
One question and one request. The question is, I just don't quite understand the intention of how this fits with the buses that then are coming on the Comerton. If the buses will come down on the next scheme that we're talking about, the whole of the Comerton route, whether they would still come down Sidgwick, if that's the intent. Maybe that's my misunderstanding, or everybody's looking very perplexed. They're on West Road. Well, then that comes on to my second, because I did just look at the papers, though it does say Sidgwick Avenue in the business case going forward. So in the next item, it still has Sidgwick Avenue on there. So then my question, if that is the case, is then can we make sure that as part of this, we do monitor the impact on West Road, and part of the second part of the scheme in the design of the permanent solution considers West Road? So I think otherwise we're just storing up not just a challenge, but also possibly quite a dangerous issue if that becomes the only motorised access. That road also doesn't work particularly well. Children access to the university library, people coming out of the thing. So I think we need to consider West Road as part of this, both in terms of the monitoring that happens in this phase and the permanent solution that comes forward.
Yeah, so Tim and then you.
I just wanted to say that I really enthusiastically support this. I do think that it is strategic in the way that I doubted the last. I think it clearly addresses the conflicts involving thousands of people, and it is part of a longer route, which clearly is already well travelled and will be better travelled with our further changes in the future. So it seems to me something that we should definitely go forward with option A.
Heather.
So you may be reassured to we're going back to a natural order, where obviously I'm going to have a slightly different view. It does feel more like the natural. See, look, smiles all around. I'm not Satan, you know. Oh, you laughed. That was laughed quite loudly. So for me, when I look at this road, well, at least I've made someone laugh and smile today. Smiling is better than frowning. It obviously needs something doing. I have no questions of that, and I have great sympathy with what's been said about the state of the road. I mean, one of my villages has a 15-metre pothole. I'm debating whether it can even be classed as such. So, yeah, without doubt, I can understand why people are concerned about that. But if we closed roads because of the state of them, I don't think we'd have many, well, I don't think I'd have a single road in my patch. So, yeah, we have to take that with perspective of the long-term view rather than just the short-term surfacing. For me, what really brings it home is when I look at page 67, you've got that photograph, which conveniently somebody's on a mobility scooter just at the point of photographing. And I look at this and I think there is more that, I think it sort of comes back to what Councillor Manning was saying. I think more could be done with this than almost shutting the road is the simple option, it's the easy option. But it does create, we know from other projects, that when you start closing roads, you're just displacing problems. This is not something that's going to stop people getting in their car. Yeah, those cars are still going to be coming through the city, and what we could end up doing is something that, when it's displaced, becomes dangerous. And actually then deters people from using bicycles and walking and everything else. So actually, for me, the big issue I know is the trees, and nobody wants to see the trees. But if I could introduce some ideas from the countryside, perhaps, that something like this, if you didn't have the parking, you could, around the trees, still secure things, and actually reference has been made to sort of the speed, that if it become one way, it could be quite quick. That essentially you create almost like chicane and passing places sort of give way, but it still enables the flow of traffic to happen, but it will naturally slow it down, which will improve the safety. And would also mean you could extend the footpaths around the trees, and you can do chicanes where cycle paths, go straight through. So almost creating a sort of a weaved situation. I think that would meet everybody's objectives without then displacing traffic elsewhere. I think simply just closing the road is not the answer. And one thing in particular that struck me on this page, it says the previous proposal was about a one-way system. And so this wasn't even just stopping. There was people concerned about even making it one way, that it be displaced. And there was clear objection when you look at the sort of scale and percentages, 85 objections to 7 supporting. We also need to take people with us when we do these things. And if we consult on something and we're given a clear response, we can't just ignore that. So for me, I think actually closing, even temporarily, is going even further than one way and everything that was said there. So I can't see anything in what's going forward here that would make people more, looking at the responses, giving them more inclined to support it. So I think something does need to be done, and I have a lot of sympathy for the situation, but I don't think this is right. I think all we're going to do is displace the issue, and that could end up being more dangerous. So I don't support it.
So can you respond to that, particularly that last set of that critique? Thank you.
So in terms of the one way that was previously proposed, it was that there were kind of two main groupings of objections against it. So one grouping was against specifically the fact that access to the surgery was going to be more difficult in terms of access because you would have to come all the way down the road. We've addressed that because you can still access from the top of the road into that area. And that's why those groups and those stakeholders are now supportive of the proposal we're putting forward. And then the other side was that, you know, it didn't feel like that it was reducing traffic enough. So that was the other kind of set of objections. And kind of from that side, that's why we're looking at stopping the through traffic, and that's why this proposal was brought together. And I mean, it has been, the original proposals were back in 2023, and we've taken time to talk to different stakeholder groups to try and come up with a solution that is kind of as widely supported as we can achieve. And that's included discussions with the residents groups, with various interest groups like Living Streets, Cam Cycle, as well as the colleges, the GP surgeries users along that route. And that's why this is the proposal we're putting forward. And we're only doing it experimentally for a year, so we can look at it, we can gather the feedback, we can make sure that it is working. Thank you.
Paul?
Yes, thanks, Chair. There's often an argument that schemes like this displace traffic elsewhere. A lot of evidence doesn't support that.
Yes.
And I wondered whether it might be possible to kind of gather that evidence as part of this, as well as is it part of the you know, the data that will be collected.
Yeah.
I wanted exactly what I was saying. I'm in favour. I just want to avoid that. I think this is a good thing to do, but I want to make sure that we do monitor what the impact is and make sure that West Road. So I just want to clarify where my comment was coming from.
Right, you've set everybody.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you to Thomas for clarifying that you have gone back to stakeholders and on this new revised proposal, and that you are now getting support for those. So I support this scheme, and I'm grateful for the clarification on that point. Thank you.
Yes, and that's been backed up by a lot of the correspondence that's been forwarded to you, and it's I don't recall having so many letters of support coming in on a scheme than this one. Ian.
I'll just be very brief. Traffic evaporation, not literal evaporation, it's a real thing. Mill Road, when it was closed, the impacts were measured and there was almost no impact apart from down one street, and everyone was saying a similar thing, that, oh, it will go everywhere. It just didn't happen. People make alternative choices, alternative journeys.
Hey, Lisa, yeah.
I'll just say one thing. I have to say, we started talking about this very, very preliminarily when I was still chair of the board, and I remember thinking, guys, I'm unlikely to still be here, although I wish I will be, when you're actually bringing something forward, but good luck, because I genuinely, I looked at it and I was like, nothing is going to be possible that will make any significant portion of people agree, and we will get clobbered and, threatened with death by hanging from one of these trees. Yes, real experience, unfortunately. I'm astounded by what I'm seeing. This is far beyond what I thought was going to be possible. I don't count for nothing now, but I got letters from people saying that please support this. I hadn't realized to what extent actually you were pushing us an open door, so I'd like to congratulate people. I know how hard this was in the last couple of years. And it should be experimental, because I think it's very important that you actually have the strategic eye on the kind of things that you think might happen, and also on some of the things that you probably suspect won't happen, but might. So displaced traffic is one of them, and I absolutely agree with what everybody else has said, that I think it's always less than people fear. But more importantly, I think that road has been crying for some kind of re-establishing it for what it's supposed to be used, because it doesn't look like a road that it should be used in the way that it's used now. So well done, and I really hope it goes well.
You reminded me of how traffic was taken out of Cambridge City Centre in small bite-sized chunks over 2 decades, I think, and probably no one thought it was going to be possible, but baby steps and good engagement with stakeholders and responding to their main concerns has clearly worked in this particular case. So just a few things that have come out of here, which I think we'll need to send back to the Assembly, which is, the Executive Board, is that we support it. big one. But we also want to see the consequential impacts on the impact assessment. And there was a challenge of the multiple experiments, and I was just wondering whether officers could respond to that.
So no, not now. Allow us to reflect on it. So in a former life, I was at Transport for London, and we did quite a bit of work on that, and it wasn't the British legislation being the way it is, it's not quite as straightforward as we may like it to be. So let us reflect, and we'll come back.
Will you write to Ian about it?
Pardon?
Will you write?
Yes, we'll come back.
So you'll get a letter.
Some form of communication.
But I guess that, you know, we have had a few experimental TROs, Ian. We have had a few, and so there's a library of experiments to refer back to.
It's the options, and it's also then the time scale, and can you chop and change. There's a neat idea in there somewhere, but you've got to go with the law, which always...
I'll also reply with the couple we did in the county when we first passed the motion. We had the same sort of arguments, but I know the difficulties, I understand them.
He said to me when I first became a councillor, there's an expert behind every door. And after my campaign, I went back to him and said, we were wrong. There are 2. Okay, so we're now on to... Oh, Nitin.
Can we not use simulation and stuff? I mean, we're at the edge of technology in Cambridge a lot of the time, so why are we physically closing a road to learn how it works rather than not using some technology and data to simulate?
We can model it. There are different views in the world about modelling and whether that's a good thing or not. You know, Councillor Manning was saying earlier on about traffic on occasion does just disappear. It does disappear. But Councillor Williams was rightly saying about concerns with displacement. And so we have an opportunity with this sort of scheme to try it out. What we've got to then do is to then demonstrate, did displacement occur on West Road? Or actually, did the traffic disappear? Who knows where? And actually, we've now got a functioning supportive scheme. You don't get that level of confidence with traffic models in my experience, albeit the Department for Transport likes them.
So I just butt in quick as well, but they still do it practically in New York because they proved over a decade that you can't model it accurately because the real world impacts of what people do.
Yeah, I mean, there's a human dimension, the behavioural dimension to this that everybody's got to experience and feel it. They're not going to trust the model. Anyway, we move on now. Agenda item 9, and this is the Greater Cambridge Greenways Combaton Full Business Case. This is pages 77 to 86 in your agenda pack, and we have another public question. So if you'd like to come to the table, this is Anne Miller, Chair of Carbon Neutral Cambridge. You have 3 minutes, Anne.
Thank you, Chair. I'd first like to say as Carbon Neutral Cambridge, we very much welcome the Combaton Greenway. Please, at the joint assembly meeting in February 2025, Council strongly supported our proposal for the dangerously narrow bridge on Burrells Walk to be widened as part of the Greenway. For those who don't know it, this is important because it's the absolutely key route for cyclists and pedestrians between the city centre and the university's West Cambridge site. It's also heavily used by children going to sports facilities, schools, etc., and of course elderly residents, some of the residents who are elderly. And the bridge is less than half the recommended width. And it's very clear that the improvements to Adams Road, which feeds directly into Burrells Walk, will increase the pressure on it. We carried out a survey of residents and users in late 2024, which showed absolutely overwhelming support for widening it. That's why we were very pleased when in March 25, the Executive Board agreed, quotes, to bring forward the improvements to the existing bridge structure at Burrells Walk as part of Comberton Greenway. Then in October 2025, the GCP papers said, quotes, officers have progressed with the design of a new structure to bring it in line with modern standards and provide adequate space for all user groups through this section of the city network. An online engagement will be held to share proposed alterations to the structure with the stakeholder groups. Following this, the board will be asked to approve additional funding required for the construction of the bridge in 2026. We understood that it would be this meeting that was likely to be asked to give that approval. As a key stakeholder, we were also expecting to be consulted at the end of last year, but heard nothing. And we noticed that the only mention of Burrells Walk in the current GCP papers is in clause 8.2 of the full business case for the Comberton Greenway, where it merely says, early works within Coton Village along Adams Road on Burrells Walk Bridge and Sidgwick Avenue will continue through 2026. So my question is, can you confirm that the completion of the Burrells Walk Bridge is included within the budget for Comberton Greenway, even if that's just a sort of budgetary figure because there's details not yet defined? And also give more detail on the expected timeline. I should say that, you know, in October, there will be several thousand students, some estimates I think say 6,000 students a day, cycle back and forth across that bridge. They will arrive, and if the bridge is being closed for engineering work, they will be milling around in a confused mass. So could I please put in a plea, A, for it to be funded, the funding to be agreed, and B, for the work to be scheduled for before the start of the academic term 2026. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. I'm going to ask Thomas to give you some good news.
The design of the Burrells Walk Bridge has been recently completed, which will see the structure widened to create a safer environment for all user groups. There are a couple of outstanding surveys to complete, including the geotechnical survey required to inform the design of the foundations. And due to the fact it goes over a main river, we're currently waiting for the Environment Agency to approve the method of surveying to allow us to complete these surveys in the next couple of months. Stakeholder engagement will then take place in spring 2026 to present the design of the future structure and present a high-level construction and delivery timeline. Once the cost is confirmed, which we can do through the surveys and the work, a short update will then be provided to the Executive Board for confirmation of funding. Thank you.
Very much. So would you now like to introduce the report, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. So this is the final decision on the Comberton Greenway, and it's to sign off the full business case. The route of this Greenway comes from Comberton, up Long Road, across to Coton, and then it goes from Coton via the existing route in the West Cambridge site all the way through to Sidgwick Avenue, which we've just discussed. We have already delivered the improvements in Comberton Village, improvements on Coton Village, and we're constructing Adams Road at the moment, which will be England's first cycle street when it's completed. This paper seeks permission to deliver the remaining sections. The benefit-cost ratio for this scheme is 3.9, so for every pound you spend, £3.90 comes back, representing high value for money. And section 2.8 of the report sets out the major benefits of this project. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
I'm just noting the time. We're due to finish at 4:30. on some... Yeah, you're okay for time? Just checking? Yeah, okay. Right, thank you. Then Heather wants to speak first.
Thank you. My questions are around page 80, paragraph 2.6. So I really appreciate that golden gravel is something that is being looked into more and being used. I know that it does have a slightly more cost attached, and people have argued against that in the past, but people like coming to the countryside for a day, and they like what they, the views, and that's something that we like about where we choose to live. So I think where you can mitigate, and I would strongly encourage that to be rolled out in other places. I've said what I've said about the top of it. I won't repeat that. But just a request in the way that, because it goes on to say about the lighting for the rural sections and these solar studs. And I would just reflect that it reminds me very much when we had the farmers' rally in London. Everyone was encouraged to wear their wellies, and we were on the tube. And genuinely, people asked us why our wellies were dirty and weren't clean. They had mud on them. And that is because it gets muddy and it gets dirty. And we walk through fields and we suffer the consequences. But those solar studs that are being relied on for those safety precautions are only as good as they are visible. I think you mentioned something earlier, didn't you, about water, but the mud and leaves, these are in areas with a lot of deciduous trees, and where we've seen it in other places, it's not always... I'm not saying that there is much else we could do, but I think if we need to look at the maintenance, not just of actually repairing so the cycleways don't become as potholey as the roads. I'm talking about that visibility and making sure that there is some sort of programme to look after it afterwards. And particularly, I think, with LGR coming, there's going to be lots of things that get thrown around. So if we're not really clear where that responsibility lies and what is being asked now, it could very easily just be something that gets lost until we've got a problem further down the line, and then everyone will have a row about whose responsibility it was, no doubt. So that's a bit of a plea, if that's okay, Chair.
Good point. I know exactly what you mean.
It can happen sometimes, Chair.
Well, you've done very well. Okay, so who else wants to speak? Tim.
Yes, I had a couple of questions, if I could. And it may be a reminder because of the space between meetings we have on this, but could we be reminded of the relative alignment between this and the cycle track beside the proposed C2C, just so that we understand where they are in relation to each other? And secondly, has the scope for sharing an alignment at any, or part of an alignment between different points been explored? And thirdly, has this business case taken account of the cycle provision that would go with C2C, which would then somewhat be likely to be addressing the same demand, and therefore the demand might be split between the two, and if we have just evaluated them alone, then we won't necessarily have got the picture that would exist with both.
So in terms of the location of Camborne to Cambridge relative to the Compton Greenway, so it does run parallel just to the north of the scheme. So if you look at the plan in 1.7, it in effect it crosses Long Road, which is at the top of the scheme, to the north of it, and then obviously goes just to the north of the residents in Coton, and then across on its own path into the west of Cambridge campus. They do go to kind of some different destinations, so there's some at the same, but clearly, it links into Comberton to begin with, which is the kind of the key main destination of the route. In terms of the business case, so both of these business cases have been written, both of the schemes have been managed by WSP, and therefore kind of both schemes have been taken into account when we've been looking at providing the numbers in these schemes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just had a question on the budget versus the cost. So I think the agenda pack said 12.2 million for the cost and the budget being 8.63. And then actually in the full business case itself, there was an outturn cost of 13.9. And there's some discussion about how to close the gap there, but it seems like quite a big gap. So I was just wondering if you could comment on the, I suppose my concern would be the watering down of the scheme if, you know, savings had to be made. But if you could comment on that, please.
Yeah, so there is a significant amount of risk and optimism bias in the cost that's within the full business case, and indeed the cost that's set out in the paper. And these have been kind of based on relatively high level costs. We're looking to run kind of competitions through contractors, which we've had elsewhere in the programme that have delivered significant savings. So at this time, we are not asking for any additional budget. We feel the scheme can be delivered within the budget that's available. If that was to change, and we were to, for example, get costs back from a contractor that pushed that over, then we would have to come back to the board, and we would do so, and you'd be informed. Thank you.
Our job, our exam question, our job, is to comment on these proposals that have been to be presented to the Executive Board. So the first one is to agree the full business case for the Competent Greenway, and I don't hear any violent objections to that. And note the progress with planning and acquisition of rights over land. And the board will be asked to agree to delegate authority to the Service Director of the GCP to enter into the required construction contract to build the scheme. So that's all very positive. Thank you. So with your permission, I'll move on to item 10, which I'm sure Paul's going to be very interested in. We're experiencing today projects coming through that we've talked about some time ago. Claire will recall that she mentioned Burrells Bridge some time ago, and I did with you, and it was then not in the programme, and now it's coming through the design stage, and there'll be a report to fund it in July. So, you know, we have an impact. Let's just go on to this one then. I think we just asked Thomas to present the report, and then we can have the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And first of all, just to introduce Alan Harris next to me, who's the Senior Project Manager for this scheme, taking it forward day to day. So, following feedback from the board, assembly and local members, we're looking to develop proposals for facilities at Waterbeach Railway Station. As a minimum, this would include a waiting room, toilets and a space for a mobile cafe. The facilities would be located outside the front of the station in the kind of pedestrianised car park area, and you can see that in the plan at section 2.15. We're asking the Assembly and then subsequently the board to let us progress the development of the facilities, including reviewing potential income streams to offset the kind of maintenance of the costs. And then what we're looking to do is come back, hopefully late this year, with a full proposal for what that should look like, so that it can be delivered alongside the construction of the main railway station. So that's what this report is to do, is to seek permission to start that work. Thank you.
Paul?
Yeah, thank you. Just say thank you very much to officers for listening to us and other residents on this. That is much appreciated. I appreciate there will be some cost associated with delivering these facilities, but I think the benefits will greatly outweigh the costs because it's going to make the station more attractive to people to come and use it, which is exactly what we want. I think the only comment I had, the only question I have is about the intended permanence of these facilities, whether they're intended to be meanwhile or whether what we're putting in here is a permanent thing that will be in place for decades. Because I think if it's a permanent arrangement, we do need to consider the design, and it obviously will need to come forward for planning permission. So I've just asked that we do carefully consider the design, its setting on the Fen Edge. Appreciate it's next to a railway station, but I think it's still important that the design is high quality.
Chair, if I could just explain, because this would potentially require planning permission at South Cambs, I won't be commenting to make sure I'm not predetermined any planning decision on its style, or so I hope you'll bear with me with that. I think what I can say more generally, I think facilities are required, as Councillor Bear Parker said, to make things attractive. And this doesn't predetermine me for whatever comes forward, but I would like to say I do absolutely object to the fact that taxpayers' money is having to be put towards this site, because the developers came and sat in this chamber right there and said they had the money secured, and we only gave permission because they said they had the money, and then not long later the taxpayers bailing it out. That does not reflect at all on what is designed, but I do wish to raise that. I think we need to try and safeguard for the future and have a broader discussion about what we do in these scenarios, because we can't just bail people out.
Any more comments? Paul has people that benefit in the room listening online, has campaigned on behalf of people in Waterbeach for these facilities, and pointed out that Waterbeach will be the equivalent of a small town ultimately, and to have a railway station without facilities just wouldn't be right. So it's very welcome that these proposals have come through, and thank you for promoting these proposals. So we got it again. I'm just going to go over the matters that the executive board are going to make decisions around. So the first one is to progress the further development of facilities, which will include a modular design waiting room and toilets. Agree for officers to work on income streams to support delivery of the facilities with the County Council, Network Rail and Govia Thameslink. I honestly think there's scope to make it into a self-financing model, and I would strongly recommend that that's a goal, given the pressures on local authority revenues. And note officers will work with the County Council on maintenance arrangements and agree to receiving an update report and final proposal once the full costs are clearly understood. Noting that an increase in budget would be required at this stage because there's no budget provision for this at this moment, but that can be arranged. So, the message of support from the Assembly. Well, thank you very much again. Once again, this is really appreciated. It's great. So, and just move on then to agenda item 11. This is our last item, so we're not going too far over. This is the one which we deferred from the progress report, and it responds to a request that was made by the Assembly at its last meeting, which is the GCP Smart Programme update. Here's Dan himself. And as you'll have read in the report, it's a one-man project. And yeah, but you've got other partners, haven't you? We have. So Dan, can you introduce your report, please? Thank you.
Yes, certainly. Thanks, Chair. And I have a presentation to support. Great. I'll get through really quickly because I understand we're under time pressure. So if you could put the presentation up, please. So yeah, I'm just going to run through some of the key projects that we've been delivering. I think if we go to the first slide, the one thing that I wanted to mention was actually we've been really successful in bringing in additional funding to the programme. So we brought in about 16.6 million. So for every £1 that the GCP have invested, we brought in about £6.30. We were recently successful in the European funding bid, which has brought in an additional 325,000. And we have an interview on Monday for some additional funding, which will extend our autonomous vehicle work. And that's a grant for 4 million plus 1 million in industrial contributions. Next slide, please. So we've been doing a lot of work looking at how autonomous vehicles can support the public transport network, and most importantly, how it can support the new busways that are proposed. So we are validating the technology to be used as the guidance system on the new busways. We're also looking at how autonomy could extend the public transport network, particularly running out of hours, improving the quality of service and reducing costs, which could make other services that are not commercially viable at the moment commercially viable. We have run approximately 3,400 miles so far, and we've carried 1,787 passengers. We're operating on the biomedical campus, running from Babraham Park and Ride through the biomedical campus and on to Trumpington Park and Ride. And we're also operating out of Madingley Park and Ride, linking the Cambridge West site with the Eddington development. Next slide, please. If successful in our funding bid, the next phase of this will be to really move towards commerciality. And so we've got a number of organisations within Cambridge who are interested in running commercial automated bus services, but there are some things that we need to do before we reach that point. I think one of the most important things is, will people use these services? So we've done quite a lot of engagement already. We're looking at people with protected characteristics. So if you're in a wheelchair, how would you get onto the bus? How can we make sure that you're safe and secure? And how do we do things like ticketing and revenue protection? And then also developing the business case. So really understanding what the investment will be and what the return on that investment is likely to be. And then continuing to look at how the guidance systems will support the new busways. So this is a really important step for us, and it really moves us towards commerciality. Next slide, please. One of the other big projects that we've been running is the development of the sensing network, and we've heard a number of discussions today about the importance of data. So we now have a sensing network that has 106 sensors in Greater Cambridge and 133 sensors overall, because some of them sit outside of Greater Cambridge. And we've been working with the biomedical campus, who are about to deploy an additional 30 sensors, and we're looking at data sharing agreements that they can be brought into the wider network. We have a data platform which we're aggregating that data into, and that also includes things like Tagmaster data, INRIX data, which is vehicle trips, voice, scooter and bike data, and parking data, as well as bus movement data. And that means that officers can use that when they're developing business cases or when they're doing monitoring and evaluation of schemes. Next slide, please. And we've already seen some of that today. So the work that Thomas has been doing on Sidgwick Avenue, they've been using Vivacity data so that we can measure bicycle, walking movements, traffic movements before we put in the modal filter, and then we can understand the impact that that has. And we've also been able to see how things like the tree trunks on pavements have pushed people out into the carriageway by looking at the pathways that they're taking using the sensors that we have. We've also built a dashboard that's available on Cambridgeshire Insight, so members of the public can go on to the website, they can interrogate the data, and also it makes it easier for officers to use the data as well when they're doing monitoring and evaluation work. Next slide. We continue to feed real-time data into travel planning tools. So we feed real-time data into Google Maps, Apple Transit. We work with Citymapper as well. We feed real-time data into there. We developed these travel screens, which now sit in over 40 buildings across Cambridge. And we have a totem which sits outside the station, which gives real-time information as well. And one of the key bits of work that we're doing at the moment is looking at bus priorities. So one of the issues is that buses are struggling to get through Cambridge, which is making them unreliable. We're actually using a QR code and a sensor which can look at the bus as it's approaching. It then uses the QR code to look up to see whether that bus is on time, whether it's running whether it's running early, whether it's running on time, or whether it's running late. And then we can make a decision as to whether to give that bus priority through the traffic signals. So we've got two sites, one at Marley Avenue, Newmarket Road, and one at Coldham's Lane, Newmarket Road. And we've just got the data flowing through, so we're just starting to do analysis on that. The good thing about this is that we can feed that back into the real-time data to validate what the real-time data is saying and where the actual position of the bus is to improve the quality of real-time data. And then lastly, we're doing some work on crossings. So we've got a number of sites where we're looking at whether we can reduce the dwell time at pedestrian crossings for cyclists or pedestrians. This is an example here at Fair Street where in the morning, if you cycle up to it, there are generally quite big queues of cyclists waiting to cross there. I use it myself quite a lot, and you can wait 2 or 3 cycles of the traffic signals before you can actually get across. And what we're looking to do is to see whether we can improve the experience for cyclists and pedestrians at these junctions while not impacting on traffic movements. Thank you. So happy to answer any questions on that.
Heather.
Thank you. An area where I love data, and my friends call me a number nerd, so very much loving this programme and the information that comes through. And I think it is something that has the opportunity to help everybody, because it's completely infuriating when you're in a rush or you're trying to get to the hospital or something and you're sat there with traffic lights that are red and nothing's happening, nobody's going anywhere, it's just an unnecessary hold-up. So I think it can very much help with that as well. I also think that the sort of real-time information that you can gather from it and the screens, I think is really informative, because it's the unknown and the unreliability which deters people from using public transport. And we have a lot of problems in the rural areas about the viability of bus routes and that sort of thing. So that actually the automated buses is a really interesting thing to, I think that the way to get people from the villages out of cars is that sort of shuttle bus to train provision, that reliability. So that potentially will go forward with that. I just feel it's prudent at the moment, given the global context that we are in. This is a lot of data, and it is also giving a lot of control to AI and technology and the sensors and everything else. So can you reassure us that we are being very sensible and prudent when it comes to cybersecurity in relation to this? Because it is fantastic to have that smart working and moving through, but equally we need to make sure we need to protect it, that we don't have things coming to a standstill because of a cyber attack or something like that. And also what you were saying about the QR codes for buses, is it perceived that that also could be something you could give to emergency vehicles to give them priority? Thank you.
So yes, the QR codes could be attached to any vehicle, so they could be used for emergency vehicles. On the cyber security front, when we procure, we always ask for certain standards from the companies that we're working with to make sure that they're cyber secure. We also do DPIAs, which is effectively a data processing form that they need to fill in, which tells us where the data is stored, how it's being processed, and how they're using the data. And we were the first authority in the country to use the Algorithmic Transparency Recording Standard, which is a new government standard that's been developed for transparency in the use of AI. So we registered what we were doing, what programs we're using, how we're using data, and what process we've put in place for transparency.
Thank you. So can we be assured that none of our data is being secured in Russia or America? It's staying where it is?
Yes, you can be assured of that.
Thank you. In the current climate, I felt it was prudent to check.
So level the autonomous vehicle stuff, it's great to see that's kept going. I've got some equally detailed questions. I mean, this is a general point I make in pretty much every council meeting I'm in now. When we use the term AI, can we please specify what AI we're talking about, what models we're talking about for Gen, what, you know, what classifiers we're using if it's machine learning, etc., etc. That just gives it's a sort of detail if everyone's looking at me, I have this probably not looking at me thinking I'm nerdy, but other people, it's the sort of detail that we see in highways reports, but we don't see in these sort of reports, and it's not a criticism of views, particularly, it's throughout. Do we have a data strategy? Are we looking at things like data products as part of this, or other the alternative strategies available? Because that covers the stuff around data sovereignty. The data platform that's been procured, I was interested in, mainly because we said we procured a data platform, and then it talks about using Power BI to write reports, which confused me. If it's a data platform, we shouldn't need to be using Power BI to create reports in it, unless there's a good reason for that, and there may well be. Be interested. I'd be interested to know how this links up with the work that's happening at county around this. So things like pulling the data from One Network and Aurora are obvious kind of things you could get into that, and how, I mean, there may be issues around different bodies and access. What else was there? The whole stuff around the monitoring, live monitoring the streets. Again, there may be a good answer to this, but I just struck that the new schemes we put in as GCP, i.e. things like Milton and Histon, particularly the famous birthday cake roundabout, the fact that that wasn't linked doesn't seem to have been linked up with the smart network. That may not be down to you. There may be other reasons for that, because that's had to have manual traffic monitoring put in, as I understand it, when the signalling's been changed. So that's another one. Where are we going to? Oh, yeah. I'll just finish on the... I'm assuming we're 27001 compliant. If ISO 27001, yeah, okay. The bit about AI in consultations, we're obviously presumably training an LLM. So who owns that training? Who owns the LLM? Who owns the training data? I hope we own it and not the third party. So it's quite a long list there. I apologise, and I'm happy to send it to you outside of this as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer it in more detail outside of this, but just a quick one. The data platform aggregates the data. Power BI is the tool that the County Council used for creating dashboards, so we thought it was prudent to integrate the data platform into Power BI so officers could use it, because it's kind of what they're used to. We are building an AI tool which will allow you to use natural language to query the data as well, because we want to make it as easy as possible for people who are non-data experts to use the data. On One Network, we are integrating One Network data into the platform at the moment. We're just trying to overcome some of the licensing issues. We haven't looked at Avalon yet, but there is the potential to do that. When it comes to traffic signals, a lot of the traffic signals are on Scoot and Mover at the moment. We are talking to the signals teams, and they've been involved in some of the trials we run about how we could potentially move to the next version of Scoot, Scoot 8, which has just been released and utilises AI. And then on the large language model, just to give you comfort, yes, we own both the model and the data as well.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a few things I want to follow up, but it's not in public yet.
Just as an opposite, the team's done a great job there. I think if you look at where we started to, I don't know whether anyone's been on the bus, but you should go. It's an experience to watch it drive and keep on trying to stay in the middle even with all the buses and things parked beside it. I think the other thing is, you know, we're talking about simulation. He's got data that you might, in 3 or 4 years' time, not have to close roads to get information. But it's something that we've worked on, I think you guys have done, and it's something we need to really keep on pushing, because that, I think, is the big difference between this area and a lot of the people who've talked about autonomous buses and trying to get it. This is not working, and we just need to push it. I've also got a free pass to use it on there now.
I've just got, again, if you go into this, I'm just interested to know if you've done any work on, because if you're taking public consultations, you're taking essentially objectives, and LLMs don't deal with negatives. Have we looked at that at all. I realise that's a very detailed question, so we can follow up afterwards. Peter's looking at me.
So it's not a pure large language model. There is a platform which sits in the back of it, which allows you to do that. I think it would be worth a more in-depth conversation because it's not something that we can kind of explain now, but I'm happy to do that.
So, Paul, I hope it's not going to be as technical as...
I don't think so. Obviously, the work towards trialling the buses for the busways is obviously very important because it supports those busways. What are the regulatory hurdles that will have to be, what are there regulatory hurdles that will have to be, looked at in order for the buses to run on the busway? So there's the Autonomous Vehicles Act. Do vehicles fall under the Autonomous Vehicles Act? And therefore, the requirements of that act, do they apply to these vehicles?
So the Autonomous Vehicle Act looks to move towards taking a driver out of the vehicle, and we're not looking to do that on the new busways at the moment. All that we're looking to do is to use the technology as guidance. So it doesn't really, the new act and how the new act moves from the current regulatory framework to a new regulatory framework doesn't really affect the new busways. The Transport and Works Act, under which the busways are being built, require that it has guidance, but there has been a change to the act which means that you can use sensor-based guidance, which this will be.
Sorry, Chair, just to add. I mean, the broad envelope is the Autonomous Vehicles Act, but that will continue to need to be developed, certainly for passenger-carrying vehicles. So part of the issue around the trial is not just demonstrating the technology, but it's also throwing up the sort of legislative and the sort of legal issues that will need to be considered to get a fully autonomous passenger operating vehicle, not just on a guided busway, but on any road. So, whilst it provides the umbrella, I think there's quite a lot more work that needs to be done on the regulatory side.
So we've looked into the future, haven't we? And you're keeping me from that.
Sorry, I know you're my taxi, so I don't leave and you don't leave, and that's fine. No, I just wanted to ask very quickly. I didn't want to, but then I heard the signalling team, and I have to ask. It is my impression, and it's been my impression for a while, that the County Council gives itself too many headaches in relation to signalling by insisting on a very engineer, computer says this, and it said this in 1970, and therefore that's how it still is, of how the lights should be synchronized. And being on site as I was on Milton Road with all those new junctions, and we have a lot of new traffic lights, not everybody likes them, but there you go. But a lot of the problems were not because the traffic lights were there, it was because the efficient timings that we were expecting weren't being implemented. So I was wondering, are we making any headways into trying and making the templates from which we devise our standard modes of signaling, making them a bit less clunky, so that, you don't have to wait for every single, I mean, there are some flows that can go at the same time, that sort of thing. And this seems to me a good way for this to be proved, so that people will not come back and tell you that this is dangerous, when it's not. Is that possible?
So we're feeding the results of the trials that we've carried out into the signals team. I think, what they're trying to balance is introducing new technology with cost and the kind of business case of doing that and the kind of value, and also investing in technologies that they know have kind of been proven. So it is a bit of a kind of juggling act, and I think when the time is right and when the technology begins to mature slightly, then they'll start to think about some of those investments. And what we're seeing actually is the technology is maturing. So TRL, who own and kind of operate Scoot, have a new Scoot product on the market, which is commercially available, which a number of areas are beginning to roll out. So I think, you know, in the future, we will see them taking advantage of some of these technologies as they kind of mature.
Encourage them, please.
This is kind of the smallest leg of the work of the GCP, but I can foresee it's going to be its most impactful in the future. And thank you, Dan, for shining a light on what you're doing. And thank you so much. It's fascinating, and this is a very inexpensive way of improving traffic movements, not just vehicles, but pedestrians and cyclists. And I think the other thing, of course, the big prize is cheaper public transport and more reliable public transport for the future. So thank you very much. I think we now understand why we should be privileging the SMART programme. So thank you. That's the end of today's entertainment. And the date of the next meeting is 2 p.m. Thursday, the 18th of June. So thank you very much, everyone. See you after the meeting.